Just when you think they can't get any better, they do. It's beautiful. Thank you. Our scripture today is from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and rich, and he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not on account of the crowd, because he was small of stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all murmured, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." May God add his blessing to our hearing and understanding of his word.
Golly, seems like the last few Sundays we just can't get away from sin. Maybe it's more than just the Sundays, I don't know. So I don't know if this is a confession, I'll let you decide, but another confession. I made a confession to begin last Sunday's sermon. And so yesterday at the Walk for Down Syndrome, my grandson Eli hangs out with me most of the day while Susan's working really hard with the registration, and Sarah's at her table for bluegrass.org, and Eli and I are just making mischief. And there was a silent auction, and there was a big basket of books. He loves books. And so I said, "Eli, let's go bid on the books." And so it was well under the price that it said, that they were worth. And so we put our little bid in, and every now and then we'd walk back over there and somebody else would have bid, and so we'd write in another bid, and pretty soon it's getting up to the value of what the books are, and we write in another bid, and Eli said, "Papa, you could just go to the store and buy them for less than that." And I said, "Eli, I use this as a teaching moment. Eli, this is about raising money for Down syndrome." I said, and for supporting people with Down syndrome. And I said, "So if we pay a little more than what they're worth, all of that money is going." "Oh, okay." So I'm teaching him about silent auctions and bidding. So we stand over about 10 feet away, and we're just staring at these books, and we're standing 10 feet away. And I said, "Eli," "now when somebody comes up and looks at those books, think really hard, keep moving." And so sure enough, somebody would walk up, and we'd sit there, and I'd look at him, and he'd look at me, and they'd move on. And so we'd high five or fist bump, And then one time there wasn't anybody standing there. I said, "Eli, do you think this would work?" I said, "Hold your bow up and get your imaginary arrow out, and let's stand there like this, when somebody comes up." We didn't do that. I said that'd be a little creepy, but so here's probably the confession, if there's any confession in there. There was this one lady that would come by in a Batman mask, and she kept upping our bid, and it was just getting kind of ridiculous, And I said, "Now, Eli," "we're not going to go over this amount." And to kind of teach him, there was a limit. You don't always get what you want and that kind of thing. But I said, we didn't actually walk at the walk. We stayed back, and I said, she went on the walk, and they shut this thing down at 12, and she's not going to be back in time to make the last bid. And so he said, "Papa, 2 minutes till 11:59, 1 minute till 11:59. It's 11:59. I went up there, we made the last bid, and we just stood there, until the lady came and tore the sheet off, and I said, "Can we write you a check right now?" So anyway, that might have been a little, I don't know. Well, anyway, we paid for it, though. We paid for it. The hymn by Harry Emerson Fosdick that we'll sing at the end of the sermon is one of the favorite hymns of my friend Jim Hazelrig. And I remember us in years past talking about this hymn and the power of it. It says, God of grace and God of glory, on your people pour thy power. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the facing of this hour, for the facing of this hour. He wrote those words to this hymn in 1930. Can anybody tell me what was going on in 1930 all across this country? The Great Depression, yeah. You would have to know the depth of suffering and the loss of the American people to know the sheer spiritual force these words contained as congregations began to sing these words across this great land. People who had previously been self-supporting, had jobs, no longer had jobs. A lot of the people in the cities were standing in lines for food at soup kitchens. Some people lost fortunes and their lives in the process when they couldn't deal with such a loss. They would take their lives in total despair over the stark change in their life situation. The beginning of the Depression was marked by the crashing of the stock market in 1929. But it actually lasted for about 10 years until we started gearing up for World War II, and there began need for a lot of workers, and there were jobs available. Now, turning to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus would have been a person in the New Testament who helped impose oppressive and unfair taxes on the people of Jericho. You might say it was a kind of a unilateral imposed depression by Rome. If they needed more money to feed their children, Zacchaeus came to take more than the government share in taxes. If they needed money to take care of aging parents, Zacchaeus was there to take that money to pay for Roman stormtroopers and their governors' lavish lifestyles. If they needed the money to pay for a place to live, Zacchaeus and his henchmen were there to take their money under the guise of tax rules established to support this hated Roman occupying force. That's what Zacchaeus did, along with those who worked for him. After all, he was a chief tax collector and had become rich by anyone's standards, taking money from the people by extortion. So we need to have this true picture of Zacchaeus before we start talking about Zacchaeus. In the Bible study on Wednesday, I said, what's the little song about Zacchaeus? And all four of the women launched into this unison version of Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. I didn't sing with them. So we need to have this real picture instead of just this sweet little man who's seeking Jesus. We have to know why he was seeking Jesus. He clearly had a dark soul. He was greedy, he was selfish, had no empathy for the average person, and was willing to call the Roman guard physically in prison or worse to impose his will and the will of the Roman government on normal people. I suppose none of us would want anyone to stand up on Sunday morning from an ornate wooden pulpit and lay out our worst side, as we kind of are with Zacchaeus this morning. But there was a day, on this day something unexpected happened. Something we'll call him Zach, changed. He heard that a man was coming who would eat with people like him, sinners and tax collectors. He heard that this man had the power to forgive sinners. Here on this street, soon to arrive, was a man of truth and righteousness who still had the spirit of humility and warm spiritual friendship, who, while he would call out the worst in you, would take that and throw it on the trash heap of life. It was as if folks were asked to write their sins on a piece of paper, and they hand them to Jesus, and rather than Jesus poring over them and memorizing them and looking at them, he just wadded up that piece of paper and threw it in the fire. So, word spread. He was there. He's walking down the street. It says he's walking through Jericho, maybe not intending to stay. But Jesus took opportunities as they presented themselves, and Zacchaeus went out to see Jesus. And the text mentions that Zacchaeus was short, and because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowds lining the street, so he climbed a tree. But there's maybe another little angle to this. It may be that the people hated him so badly that as he started to wiggle his way through, they just closed ranks and kept him from getting to the front to see Jesus. He persisted and climbed that tree to get a glimpse of this man who wasn't like the rest of the people. This man bore hope down the street in Jericho. His reputation had preceded him. His healing ministry would wound up in forgiveness of sins, setting people free from their past, and opening up a new day for them, a new life. You have to at least want to see someone like this. This doesn't happen every day. This man, Jesus, was willing to risk his own reputation by associating with horrible, despicable people. Think about that for a minute. We talked about this in the Bible study. And I said, think about Jesus coming here. And, of course, all of us in that Bible study have been in church all of our lives. We've been faithful. We've been givers. We've participated. We've been leaders and given our lives to Jesus. And if Jesus came, he'd probably hang out in the parking lot talking to folks walking through our parking lot before he'd come in here, and we'd be going, but Jesus, don't you understand? I've been preparing for this day all my life, for you to come and be here and come in and give the sermon and hang out with us. So the people were not too happy at all. They were not happy that Jesus would do this. They had this preconceived notion of who Jesus was, the good and righteous man who would associate with the good and righteous people. But if Jesus couldn't come, if he couldn't come into your life and change something, renew something, refresh something, forgive something, he needed to find people that he could do this with, or heal something. Add that too. Jesus' life work was looking into the souls of the people and seeing good potential and calling out the sins which cast long, dark shadows of regret over their lives. Jesus puts it this way. When he came to this place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. I must stay at your house today. Jesus just invites himself into Zacchaeus' life and right to his dinner table. It felt like Jesus changed his plans, but you and I know that I think Jesus knew where he was going and who he was going to see. Now, at this point, Jesus just lets him talk. It's a short range of phrases, but if you'll break them up into 3 different pieces, then maybe we'll see what's going on here. Have you ever known somebody like that in your life that would ask you a question and then just fall silent? Frustrating, isn't it? I had a seminary professor when I went to interview to go to seminary, Dr. Ron Graham, one of the sweetest, kindest, good scholarly people that I've ever known. And he asked me some open-ended question. I don't remember what it was, and I answered it. I thought I'd answered it, 3 or 4 sentences, I don't know. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. Well, he got what he wanted because I started talking again to fill in that silence. He wanted either for me to reflect on the words that I had just said, or he wanted to see how I would fill in the silence. whether I was comfortable with the silence. And it was very uncomfortable. Now, maybe a parent has done that. Mothers are pretty good at that when they get completely frustrated with you. You're in real trouble when they fall silent. They're silent. And so the child, 10, 11 years old, 9, 8, whatever, they keep talking, and they indict themselves for what they've done. And after a while, the child begins to say, "Yeah, well, I'll take out the garbage all week, and I'll do my homework on time, and I'll clean my room." And mom's just like, "Okay." So Jesus falls silent. He just listens. Zacchaeus keeps talking. First he says, "Half my possessions I'll give to the poor." Jesus doesn't say anything. Few people are going to do that. That's not bad. I'll give half my possessions to the poor. What a generous offer. And Jesus doesn't say a word. And so Zacchaeus keeps on talking. He says, "And if I have defrauded anyone, well, I'll pay them back 4 times what I owe them." Jesus remains silent. Well, and then Zach goes on to say, "I'll pay him 4 times as much." That's the third thing. Really, 4 times as much? Finally, Jesus speaks. And the text doesn't say this, but I just have to believe Jesus was smiling from ear to ear. Just smiling. This is great. This is great. And Jesus just says, "Today salvation's come to this house." Because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost. And now he's found Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus has found himself in Jesus. Now, it's not just good news for Zacchaeus, but it's good news for us. Dr. Fosdick, in writing this hymn, includes, I think in the last verse, "Let the search for thy salvation be our glory evermore. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, serving thee whom we adore, serving thee whom we adore." Zacchaeus now adored this man Jesus. It is a destination to which we can all aspire. So let's stand and sing Dr. Fosdick's hymn, "God of Grace and God of Glory." And in the singing of this hymn, if anybody wishes to give themselves to the living Christ and prepare for their baptism, we invite you to come forward. Or if you wish to transfer your membership or renew your faith, you may come forward and meet us at the front as we sing number 464, "God of Grace and God of Glory."